and welcome back to the Reaper. So just another video, we're ticking off the list of stuff that's been requested. So we've got so many requests to do a video about the requirements, the hardware requirements, and quote unquote what are the best hardware what's the best hardware setup to run DCS. Well, and we get that asked every day, and it's really annoying. So I thought I'm just going to answer it, and then no one else has to ask it. So, what is the best hardware setup? Well, that's an unanswerable question. That's like asking, what is the best car to buy to get to work? You could buy a Porsche, and that would get you to work really, really fast, or you could buy a Tesla, and it would get you there really, really efficiently, or you could buy a Honda and it will get you there really, really cheaply, or a Ferrari will get you there really stylishly, or a Mercedes comfortably. They all get you there. None really does the job better than the other. Empirically, they're just different ways of doing it. And that is the same in the DCS. There's loads and loads of different ways. We've got 50, 60 active pilots. They've all got completely different setups. They all, work pretty much as well as each other. So we can't talk about what's the best setup. What we can talk about is we can talk about what we've got. I don't think that's really relevant to anyone, but we can say that. More importantly, we can say some more empirical things, i.e. what's the minimum requirements for DCS for someone who wants to get into it and doesn't have a lot of money and whatnot. And then we can talk about what are the optimal, what I call the Grim Reaper's optimal high level entry. So minimum is the absolute basic you need just to run DCS, and the optimal is what you need to run DCS, like us, doing things like flying in formations and all the cool stuff that we do that require a little bit extra hardware. So right, first of all, we're going to do the absolute minimum, and we've just pretty much taken this off the DCS website, so you can find this yourselves, but we'll go through it anyway just to get it down. You need an operating system that is 64-bit and is Windows 7 or over. You need a processor that is an i5 or over. You need 8 GB of RAM or over. You need graphics card, a minimum level of NVIDIA GeForce GTX 560 or the equivalent ATI 6950. Hard drive, we calculated you need for the absolute minimum of 30 gigabytes on a hard drive. Obviously, more is better. Connection, a minimum you need is a broadband interconnection. I know our Sherman runs off a bloody phone somehow, but really the minimum you need is a decent broadband connection with a solid Ethernet cable, not a Wi-Fi. We've got Wi-Fi drivers, and they're an absolute nightmare. They ruin flights by disappearing and lagging and stuff like that. You must have a broadband internet connection with a hard Ethernet cable, or that. What you need is a joystick as minimum. You don't need anything. For a minimum, you just have a keyboard, and you can do everything in that keyboard. You can fly your jet, you can run its control surfaces, you can run its systems. Yes, you will be crap at your aeroplane, but as an entry, there's no reason at all not to just use your keyboard to get into DCS. Don't be scared to do that. Don't think you need millions of pounds of joysticks and stuff, which can be expensive. Head tracking, you can see on our videos that you can see me looking around and looking like virtual reality and all that. Do you need that? No. You will need that for our optimum GR level, but for basic, you don't need that at all. I flew for about half a year without any head tracking, and I was absolutely fine just to learn the basics of the aeroplanes and flight dynamics. Okay, regards minimum, have you got anything to add to that, Sherman?
Going back to the controller and the keyboard thing, I do know a guy who flew for a while with an Xbox controller, so that is an option. Yep,
and that's essentially free because you can get them off. If you haven't already got one, you can get one off eBay or something for like $10 when I tried to sell mine, so that's dirt cheap. So I have no idea how does that work? Is that USB connect?
Yeah, basically any Windows PC can hook up a Microsoft game controller.
Alright, so that's just an example of how cheaply you can do this, and to get into DCS it's free, it doesn't cost anything. It costs money when you start getting the big serious jets. Yes, you can spend a fortune like that, but to get started it costs literally nothing, and they've designed it so it's like that, so anyone can get into it. So that's the minimum spec down, super easy. Next, a bit more complicated, what we call the Grim Reaper's optimal high spec. Is what we expect you to have if you're going to come and fly for the Grim Reapers, is what you really need as a minimum If you're going to fly and do what we do and fly in our big games where we've got 20, 30 planes flying around each other in formation, blah, 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 blah. So, first of all, operating system, 64-bit Windows, 7 or above. 10 recommended, but 7 and above apparently is fine still. Processor, you do not need an i7. Me and Sherman are running i5s. Mine's overclocked to, I think, 4.6 gig. And absolutely fine. It's never even run at 100%.
Minor correction on my end. I was running an i5 fine. I have since upgraded for reasons, however.
Oh, you're on an i7 now?
I am now, yeah. But on my i5, DCS ran fine anyway, so...
Yeah, that's fine. We won't get too geeky into that. But yeah, an upgraded, an i5, high-level i5 is still fine for DCS 2.5, which is important. Memory, 16, we recommend 16 gigabytes of RAM. 8 at 8, you're really pushing it. The DCS maps now are like really pushing it to fit into 8 gigabytes of RAM. So 16 is really a requirement. I've gone for a fast setup of 3 gigahertz of RAM. I found that made a lot of difference over the 2 gigahertz. So if you can do, that's useful.
I will say the behavior regarding DCS multiplayer. Having more RAM will improve your multiplayer experience at the moment because of the way DCS is programmed.
Which isn't great, but it is what it is. There's nothing out there that really compares to it, so we have to just work with it, basically. So that's fine. If you can afford 32, that's fine. A lot of people can't. I can't, so 16 fast RAM, absolutely fine. Graphics card. We're just doing this from our personal experience. So in GR Optimal High Level, what we want is really to run all of the graphics, everything turned up to maximum, basically. We don't like to cock about with having to turn graphics down. So at our Optimal, a minimum requirement we found is an NVIDIA card at an NVIDIA 1070. I think me and Sherman have both got that.
Correct.
And we're both pretty much at maximum graphic settings, and we don't really get any slowdowns unless really big things are happening. And when the slowdowns happen, it's usually more to do with network than actual rendering and stuff like that. The equivalent ATI card, we neither of us use those cards, so I can't tell you that, but someone else will be able to tell you what the equivalent of an NVIDIA 1070 is. Some of our guys are loaded money-wise, so they use like 1080s or twin 1080s and stuff, but you don't need that. 1070 is absolutely fine. You won't have any problems with that. Hard drive. You really need a minimum of 100 gigabytes and SSD, not hard drive. Hard drive, I know some people are still using hard drives and they're okay. The majority of hard drives I hear about, including mine, cause stuttering and less than optimal performance in DCS. So get yourself a big SSD, a big 250 gig or something, just for DCS, just for games, and it's worth it. And they're not that much money now anyway. Broadband is absolutely required, same as the minimum requirement. I said broadband was required, the minimum requirement. That's if you want to do multiplayer. I meant if you want to do single player, you don't need any major internet at all. But if you want to do multiplayer, which is what DCS is all about.
Technically not correct.
Go.
You have to do an online activation.
Roger, but you don't need a broadband per se for that. You can do that on a lesser service, can't you?
Or in my case, a phone.
Or in Sherman's case, a phone. But for the optimal high-level experience, for the Grim Reapers players, you've got to have the decent broadband, and you've got to be hooked up on a hard cable, Ethernet cable, because otherwise you've got stoppages. So yes, apologise. The minimum requirement, you don't need a broadband. Right. Controls. Absolute minimum. You need a HOTAS stick. So what is a HOTAS stick? It's a joystick that comes in two sections. On the right hand, you have a wobbly, traditional kind of joystick covered in buttons and switches and stuff. And for your left hand, about 3 feet away, you have your thrust lever or thrust levers, and that's covered in switches and stuff. This is your HOTAS. And what does HOTAS stand for, Sherman?
Hands-on throttle and stick, or as they call it in the US Navy training videos, a HOSAT, hands-on stick and throttle.
So bloody Navy people. And it basically means that you've got all functionality to use just your joystick and your thrust stick without ever having to touch the keyboard, or in a real aeroplane ever having to touch the dash. You can do all of the emergency quick things that you need to get to on these on these two elements that I've talked about, the thrust stick and the joystick. And so is an absolute requirement. We've kind of split them into 3 different levels. I think there's empirically 3 different levels, but low, medium and high. So low would be a starter stick, something like I started with, which is a Thrustmaster HOTAS X. I think that's their starter range. It costs like $50-$60, and it was absolutely fine. It served me for the first year or so, at which point I realised I needed to move up to a bigger stick which had more functionality, which is what I call the medium class of stick, really, at least in terms of price range. And I've got now here a Cytec X56 Rhino, which is about $200 to $250, so it's not the most expensive, but it's kind of in the middle, and it's got loads of functionality. You can see on the internet, I don't need to explain for you, you've got about 10 buttons on the right stick and about 15 on the left stick, more than I can use basically, and it's 16-bit rather than 8-bit. A low-grade stick would be 8-bit. 16-bit means you get much more control of the stick, you can get finer inputs into your aircraft, and that's how it allows you to do the real fine formation flying and stuff. Sherman, you've got somewhere between a low and a medium, haven't you? What's yours called?
Right, so my stick is an ancient Microsoft Sidewinder force feedback 2 from like the early 2000s that I inherited from my father. My throttle is the Thrustmaster TWCS, which is around $80 US right now. It's fairly, I don't know, I suppose it would be mid-range between the bottom of Thrustmaster and the top of the line stuff, which is like the Warthog. But I will say, aside from hardware failures that I've suffered several times with this thing, it's still a very good stick for its price. Sorry, good throttle for its price.
Roger that. That's fine. So that's that. So you really want to be a medium or upwards to be in this kind of high level Grim Reaper standard. And you can go high. You don't need to go high, but you can go high. Things like the Warthog, what's that, $400-$500? Super professional. Let's face it, most people can't afford that. I can't afford that, so that's just a dream. You don't need it. I can fly fine with medium level, and Sherman's fine as well. Right, which brings us on to our final thing. Head tracking causes a lot of confusion, so we're going to go into the different types. Why do you need head tracking? Well, it's so you can look around the cockpit in the aeroplane like you see, and it's absolutely essential to have. At our level, you need to be looking down at the gauges all the time. You need to be looking left at your wingman, up for hostiles, down for ground. Attacking, you've got to be looking about all the time. So the different things. First of all, we've got face tracking. Now, we've got no experience of this. It's you'd have a camera on top of your monitor, something like a PlayStation camera, and it will look at your face, and then you can use, Track No IR, which is, I think...
Yeah, I tried it at one point. It was called Face Track No IR. It essentially used another third-party program to record your face through a video camera feed. So it was essentially just picking up the details that were on the camera. I don't recommend it because it's highly ineffective and highly sensitive to light.
Roger. So it sounds a good idea because you don't need to wear any big headset on your head and stuff like that. However, we hear nothing but nightmares from it, so it's probably a bad idea, at least for now. The second level is Track IR DIY. There are various incarnations of this. This is what I use. So it's a type of Track IR. It's basically a thing, a headset you wear on your head. You move it about, and there is a camera on top of the screen, the monitor, and in this case a DIY, so it's one you make yourself. I made it for about $40. There's a PlayStation camera on top of my monitor, which was like almost free, a few dollars, and on my headset I've got duct taped on to my headset something called the Delon Clip, DELAN, which came from the UK. It was like $30, and that is the Track IR, that is the infrared emitter. So the whole thing cost about $40. It works fine. I've never needed to update, even if I could afford it, because there's no real problems with it. You see in my movies, sometimes it spazzes out and goes a bit funny. If I zoom in really close, you can see the resolution isn't perfect because it jerks a little bit. Generally, 99% of the time, it's fine. $40 is fine. Then next there's the real Track IR, which is an official product. Costs about $150, something like that. Exactly the same as Track IR DIY, but it's a professional package product that comes all in one with probably a warranty and stuff like that, and that's what Sherman uses. So it's just like Track IR DIY, except it's like a professional set.
Pretty much. The camera that comes with it as well has its own chip built in, so that takes off some of the processing pressure from your main system as well. The one downside is that the Pro version of the product, which comes with the head clip, The head clipper is made of plastic, and if you're not careful, there's a chance it can break. So it might actually be better to do a DIY with a reinforced metal clip yourself instead, if you wish.
Yep, that's what I did. Mine's metal, and it's lasted 2 years, and it's still in perfect condition, basically. So I find DIY better. Also, I prefer the software. It comes with what have I got? Blast Open Track. It's free software. Comes off the internet. That's the software. And the advantage is with Open Track. So this is the Track DIY one. You can start it during DCS. With Track IR, you have to start it before DCS. It catches a lot of people out. So I can start at any point. So I actually prefer mine. So yeah. Anyway, there's that. And fourthly, there is virtual reality. This is a nightmare that I hope never to get into. Obviously, wear a whole headset. I'm sure you know what VR is. I don't need to tell you. You've got the different permutations: Oculus Rift, Vive, something like that, isn't it, Sherman? I mean,
HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift are the two big ones. But basically, you just put a headset on and you constantly read the words every fifth frame, which says "obey."
Yeah, I don't personally. I've used one before. I don't think they're at a good enough level to run this kind of game simulation yet.
The problem is essentially you've got two screens right up against your eyes, which, never mind any sort of damage that might cause to your eyes, you can see the pixels much closer, so you need a much higher resolution to not get the pixelation effect.
Roger that. And so there's a disclaimer there. If you're going to use VR, and I'm sure you know more about this than us anyway, if you're going to use VR, you need a better PC spec than we've spoke about earlier on. So an NVIDIA 1070 won't do. You'll need at least a 1080 to run VR well on DCS.
At least to run with a stable frame rate. And I'm telling you now, playing VR with an unstable frame rate will cause severe motion sickness. I have personal experience with this.
Roger that. I prefer the best pilots in our group tend to be Track IR wearers. Don't ask me why. I just think VR is just not there yet in quality.
It'll be there soon, but not yet.
Yeah, maybe the next generation, and they're expensive, obviously. So there's that. So there you go. So just to rehash that: head tracking, face tracking. Don't think it works properly. Track IR DIY, cheap, fine, completely recommended. That's what we use for our level. Track IR, fine. VR, not my bag, but it's fine. Obviously, you just need a more expensive computer. So I hope that answers everything. Like I said, we can't answer the question, what's the best setup? There is no best setup. Everything's different. Everyone's different. Yeah, cool. So thanks very much, and we'll see you later.